So I don't think that members of the media fully grasp the implications of the questions that they ask sometimes, especially as it pertains to the prospect of a direct confrontation between the United States and Russia. Because in essence, they're asking, why aren't you doing World War III? Why aren't we going to war directly with Russia? They don't get what that means. Either they're ignorant or insane, but they haven't processed that a direct military confrontation with Russia could very easily lead to the annihilation of all life on Earth. For example, NBC News chief correspondent Richard Engel tweeted out, perhaps the biggest risk calculation / moral dilemma of the war so far. A massive Russian convoy is about 30 miles from Kiev. The US and NATO could likely destroy it, but that would be direct involvement against Russia and risk everything. Does the West watch in silence as it rolls? So the implication is that by watching in silence, well, that's immoral. We could be doing more. But at least Richard acknowledges here that to engage with Russia directly means we do risk everything. And by everything, we should be clear every single time. This means ending all life on Earth with nuclear warfare. But again, he gets credit because he at least acknowledged that. Watch what Vice President Harris was asked in an interview with CBS.
I hear you on that, but those images are heartbreaking to watch. We see innocent civilians being killed. We see children being killed. And the administration has made it clear there will be no boots on the ground. What will it take? Will anything change that? Will we stand by and watch innocent people continue to be killed here?
So a member of the media was asking the Vice President of the United States, why aren't we going to war with Russia directly? Why aren't we putting boots on the ground? Why aren't we directly engaging with Russia? And that is insanity. Everyone understands how devastating this situation is. If you have a heart, it's breaking right now for the people of Ukraine. Everybody acknowledges, or at least most reasonable people acknowledge, that Russia's invasion is aggressive and illegal, and they invaded their neighbor who wasn't provoking them. It's maddening to think about this. The pain and destruction, though, that we see in Ukraine would be orders of magnitude worse if this conflict were to grow and bring in world powers. They have to understand that. Now, when they're not calling to, put boots on the ground, members of the media and politicians are saying, well, perhaps we can do a Ukrainian no-fly zone, which, again, would lead to a direct confrontation with Russia. Here's who's calling for it. As Aaron Blake of the Washington Post explains, while the idea has been percolating in some corners for the better part of a week, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky signed onto it Monday. He told Axios that Ukraine can beat the aggressor if Western allies do their part. Other Ukrainian leaders are calling for it, as well as some conservative politicians in Britain. A Ukrainian journalist pleaded with British Prime Minister Boris Johnson for a no-fly zone Tuesday in an emotional scene. Representative Adam Kinzinger called for one Friday, and a former NATO Supreme Commander, retired U.S. Air Force General Philip Breedlove, has said its time has come. Now, additionally, Republican Senator Roger Wicker has also called for a Ukrainian no-fly zone. Now, I fully expect calls for a Ukrainian no-fly zone to grow, but understand what that means and what people are asking. They're asking for the United States to shoot down Russian jets. Again, that is a direct confrontation. And it's more than that. It's, in essence, a declaration of war. Not just any war, World War III, which will indeed involve nuclear weapons. Now, thankfully, the Biden administration has resisted all of this calls to escalate. And Jen Psaki answered perfectly when she was asked why the administration hasn't implemented a Ukrainian no-fly zone. Take a look.
On military, is there any way in which the U.S. would support a no-fly zone over Ukraine?
Well, here's what's important for everybody to know about a no-fly zone. What that would require is implementation by the U.S. military. It would essentially mean the U.S. military would be shooting down planes, Russian planes. That is definitely escalatory. That would potentially put us into a place where we're in a military conflict with Russia. That is not something the president wants to do.
So that's a no on that.
Those are all the reasons why that's not a good idea.
No, she's absolutely correct about that. I don't think that members of the press get it. They just don't seem to understand what they're calling for here. To say maybe we should do a Ukrainian no-fly zone, that is synonymous with saying maybe we should do World War III and nuclear war potentially with Russia. Understand, if there's a direct confrontation between the US and Russia, that means World War III. And if World War III is upon our doorstep, well, here's what the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said. Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov said on Wednesday that if a third world war were to take place, it would involve nuclear weapons and be destructive, the RIA news agency reported. That's what Russia's saying. That's a threat. Now, it's been about a week of war so far, and Russia has invoked nuclear weapons approximately 4 times. They're threatening that if other nations get involved, they will use nuclear weapons. That's the implication. That's what they want us to know. Now, my hypothesis is that Putin doesn't actually want to use nuclear weapons because that would almost guarantee the destruction of Russia and himself as well. It's the concept of MAD, mutually assured destruction. But that's not a hypothesis that I want to test out. Not a game that I want to play. Not a chance that I want to take. So when Russia says we will use nuclear weapons against anyone who intervenes, for the sake of humanity, I think that we should take them at their word, because we can't afford not to. So when we talk about the prospect of no-fly zone or boots on the ground, we need to be very clear. When Kamala Harris, for example, was asked that question, she should have followed it up by saying, do you realize what you're asking? That means everyone is going to die. Of course, we are doing everything that we possibly can, short of directly confronting Russia here. But you're asking for more pain and suffering. You're asking for pain and suffering, death and destruction on a scale the likes of which humanity has not seen. That's what you're asking for when you call for a Ukrainian no-fly zone or American boots on the ground directly confronting the Russian military. Now, Zach Beauchamp of Vox put together a really important article explaining why the Ukrainian no-fly zone is tantamount to a declaration of war on Russia. Quote, this is a catastrophic idea. Stripped of cant, the U.S. announcing a no-fly zone in Ukraine would be an American declaration of war on Russia, the first major conflict between the two nations that, put together, control 90% of the world's nuclear weapons. A no-fly zone is not a magical umbrella that prevents planes flying in a given area. It's a decision to shoot at planes that fly in a given area, explains Olga Oliker, the International Crisis Group's director for Europe and Central Asia. To put in a no-fly zone is to go to war. So it is likely going to be the case that we will see pressure grow for a no-fly zone, for boots on the ground, and there's going to be, appeals to suffering, which are absolutely compelling. People are dying, so obviously there's this human instinct to want to do more. I understand that. But Biden's administration, they've done great resisting calls, and I hope they continue to do that. But I think they have to lay it out a little bit more clearly so the American people understand what's at stake here. Whenever somebody asks, do you want or would you consider a Ukrainian no-fly zone or boots on the ground, they have to say, do you want everyone to die? They have to put it in those bleak terms because people don't get it. They think that a Ukrainian no-fly zone perhaps is just a minor escalation similar to sanctions, but no, it means direct confrontation. It means a declaration of war. Boots on the ground is war with Russia. If you want to survive as a species, we have to avoid that. So the situation is absolutely horrifying. Nobody is denying that. It's sad sitting there and essentially being forced to watch and doing sanctions, arming Ukrainians, trying to help from a distance. But doing more than that means we all die. Means everyone on this planet is at risk of nuclear annihilation. Because if Russia uses nukes, then the US will use nukes, and we end life on this planet. So I understand the instinct and the feeling of, man, we're not doing enough, and the war is getting worse, and Russia isn't backing down. I get that. We all get that. It's horrifying. But I need people to understand what they're asking. Specifically, I need members of the media to understand what they're asking, what they are suggesting. Instead of saying a no-fly zone or boots on the ground, just say World War III. Just say nuclear warfare. Because that's what they're asking when they urge the Biden administration to do things like that. And I really hope that they continue to thwart off, the pressure that they're feeling. Because there will be pressure for them to do more. But understand the consequences of doing more. We should do everything that we can, but we cannot directly engage with Russia. Humanity can't afford it.